It's a pet's life with Gym Dog, Ireland's first pet resort by Des the Vet. Managed by vets, loved by pets. Daycare, vet care, premium pet food and grooming. Visit at petslife.ie.
Right, there we have it, Pets Life. And just before we progress with our vet slot of the day with Des Groom, we just got another final message back from Jay just to say, when Des was asking, is the weather any better over there in Cape Town? Yep, it's super toasty. 27 degrees here in Cape Town. And my mum says hi to you all. She says that KFM in Kildare in Ireland plays better music than their own Cape Town's KFM. Doesn't get any better that for a Tuesday, Des, does it?
Good compliment, John, for yourself.
There you go. Well, whatever. It's only a bit of fun. Anyway, we're on to our vet slot, talking all things animals. A bit of a tough topic today, pet bereavement. Now, we'll get into that in just a second. But generally, it's getting to that time of the year. We're heading towards the middle to the end of November. And people are going to be thinking about Christmas and stuff with animals. We'll be talking more about, I suppose, further in. We'll have a chat about, things to do with getting animals sorted for Christmas. But there was one thing I saw already, that the pounds are heaving at the moment, and people will have a habit of offloading dogs around Christmas time.
Yeah, they do, unfortunately. When the weather being bad, people find it harder to cope with the pet. A big dog that needs to be indoors maybe isn't comfortable in the yard in bad weather, or barking or cold outside, and they're conscious of the fact that when the weather changes, animals' health changes. So then the pounds become busier, and personal factors also intervene. People's lives become more complicated and busier, and they're under financial pressures.
Yeah.
Winter's a tough time for animals and for people.
It is indeed, most definitely. Anyway, further in, we'll talk more about that. At the moment, we're going to be talking about dealing with loss of an animal. Now, I think this one is a hard subject, because a lot of people go through it, because animals are not like humans. They have a short lifespan in general terms, so you go through it more often.
They do. So week after week, John, here for the last year, we've kept our topics very information focused and interesting for people, and tried to highlight the joy and the benefit of pet ownership. But there is a sad side to it, and in veterinary hospitals and veterinary practices, we deal with this on the front line every day of the week, and we try to help people deal with it. So I think it's probably time to open a conversation and discuss the topic of pet loss and grieving for your pet bereavement, as it's called, and it's something that's not acknowledged, but it takes its toll on people, those who work with animals as well as the pet owners themselves. Something I've done a couple of podcasts about on Spotify, on my Pet's Life podcast, and it's gotten a reaction. You see, years and years ago there was this perception that the dog is just an animal, but nowadays the dog is becoming a member of the family, and frankly, I believe nowadays, unfortunately, people are lonelier.
Yeah.
Family units are smaller. There are more people on their own, and they're reliant on their pet, and their pet is a very important companion, a very, very important crutch for them.
Yeah.
Company, and gives meaning to their lives. So the benefit of that, in terms of the benefit of pet ownership and the positive improvement that a pet can have in your life, is immense. Yeah. But with that then comes the loss. So it's important to acknowledge that, and allow people maybe to think about that. If they're owning, if you're the owner of an old dog, and soon you're going to have to maybe consider when and how the end of your pet's life is going to be.
What age are we talking about here? I mean, we traditionally have animals a bit like humans. Have they extended their lifespan a bit?
Yeah, so animals have a much longer lifespan than they used to have. So typically, just to throw a number out there, a dog's lifespan was 12 years. Yeah. Now a dog's lifespan, medium and smaller breeds in particular, is 15 to 16. So we get cats, lifespans used to be 14 to 15. Now cats are living up to 20 years. Wow. So that's part of an overall improvement in our lifestyles, and it's part of an overall trend towards humanisation and giving pets human level and human quality pet care. But the dark side to that, is the sad side to it, is that there will still come a point in time whereby we can't extend that life any further. Yeah. When I was a child growing up in the farm, and we were a small family. I had 2 sisters. I didn't have a network around me of lots of friends. I didn't play football with the under 10s as kids nowadays do, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
The animals were my friends on the farm. They were my companions, my childhood companions.
Yeah.
So I've bonded very closely with the animals on the farm: cattle, horses, sheep, mares, foals, which is possibly one of the reasons why I've become a vet.
Yeah.
I've had that bond with animals from a young age.
Okay, that
and
makes
I
sense.
remember discussing this with older farming relatives at the time, this feeling of injustice, of loss. I thought it was as a child I couldn't rationalise why animals' lives were shorter than ours.
Yeah.
And this sense of injustice and unfairness.
Well, that's it, because you're going to go through the bereavement a lot quicker because of the lifespan and the age profile.
Dog owners will grieve for the loss of a dog 5, 6, 7 times in their lives.
Yeah.
And that's a tough burden on people who are animal lovers.
Yeah.
The way it was rationalised to me and explained to me at the time by farming uncles and by my dad at the time was that, say, look, these animals are a gift to us. We work with them, we train them, they're companions, they help us, we help them, they enrich our lives. But they're not humans, and they don't have a human life cycle.
Yeah.
So the life cycle of a dog or a cat, it's a shorter and more intense life cycle. And that means that if they have a life cycle of only a little more than a decade and so on, by the time they get into old age and that life cycle has run its course, even though we're not ready to lose them, because it's the end of their natural life cycle, they're often ready to go.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. I never heard of that from that perspective as well, because I think when you are an owner of an animal and an animal becomes part of the family, I think that's what it is. Animals are now part of families.
Yeah, yeah.
And
so
that's the key thing.
People grieve them. The dark side of humanisation is that the human-animal bond is so strong nowadays that we are meeting people on a daily basis very, very upset, heartbroken at the loss of a pet.
What about from the time that you know it's coming towards the end of your animal, and you know that this member of your family, you're going to have to go to the vet, you're going to have to get him to put him to sleep, to put it into context? What about the processes then?
There's a journey of acceptance.
Okay.
In terms of understanding how close it is to the end of your pet's life cycle.
Yeah.
And a journey of acceptance as regards what the vets can do and can't do. And it's about managing expectations. Now, there are tools and aids that we as vets can use. Yeah. And I'm going to talk about this again next week, and I'm actually going to bring in a questionnaire that we use, John, when it's close to the end of life. And it's a quality of life questionnaire. And it's one of the things that helps people in the decision-making process about when is the right time to let go. Okay.
Now, there's a couple of questions coming in about this subject. First of all, there's two separate questions from 2 different Christinas. So Christina right out in Maynooth, first of all. Pet bereavement doesn't get any easier. I had 2 Shih Tzus. One died 14 years old, and the second Shih Tzu just passed away October 24. Still broken-hearted.
Yeah.
That's just part of it. But I mean, from that perspective, it's not just an animal dying. That's somebody that's been part of their household for 14 years.
Yeah, we have to acknowledge that. We can't make little of it or lessen it.
And what would your advice be to Christina now at the moment, considering that the second dog, the second Shih Tzu, only passed away in the last few weeks or so? What's the healing period normally?
Well, it's very variable, you see.
Yeah.
There's a period of intense grief following the loss of a pet of perhaps a few weeks. But you can get triggers. You get recurrent bouts of grief following the loss of a pet.
Yeah.
And these recurrent bouts of grief bring pangs of loss, pangs of sorrow, maybe pangs of regret.
Okay.
So it can fluctuate.
Right.
The best you can do is mark it and acknowledge it and ritualise the process of the loss.
Yeah.
A photo of the dog, have the ashes around the place. Hopefully your friends and neighbours or your vet has marked that grief for you with a card.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give you another one. I was over in, we're doing an outside broadcast over in the Salons area in Riley Supervalue in Clane. I was talking to Pat Tiernan, and he was showing me all this carving woodwork. And what's very trendy is that you get a picture and it's superimposed onto the timber.
Yeah.
And it's of your family pet that maybe is no longer with you. And it was a terrific idea. It really was. And it looked brilliant.
It is.
I have to say, it was a great idea.
The pet crematoria now have little graveyards and little chapels to mark the process of grieving for the loss of the pet.
Yeah.
For me, the important thing is that we have to hang on to the notion that your pet is a companion animal. And the bond is a bond of companionship.
Yeah.
I think to overly humanise it and to draw affinities or parallels between the human-animal bond and, say, the bond between a parent, mother and child, or father and child.
Yeah.
I think that can be very damaging and can inflict too much additional hurt onto people because we're setting ourselves up for failure if we overly humanise our pets, because above all we must bear in mind that their life cycle is shorter, it's more intense, it's a different life cycle, and when it's time, when they're at the end of that natural life cycle, they're usually ready for it.
Okay. Second question from different Christine. Well, it's Christine, actually, not Christina. This is Christine Murphy over in Kill at the moment, and she wants to know, how soon after the loss of your animal or your dog should you be considering getting a new one? Or is that just a matter of how you feel?
Right, it's very personal. Some people, if they're at it, they may never want another dog.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And that's a valid feeling. And if a person feels like that they don't want another dog, then they should hang on to that and see how the solo walks work out for you, and see how you have to decide yourself if your house needs another dog or not. It might take months.
Yeah,
it might take months. I have my first personal experience of it was we had a German Shepherd on the farm that I named Lassie when I was 6 years old, which was a kind of a joke because Lassie was a TV collie.
It still is.
And the family members all said to me, you can't call a German Shepherd Lassie. But I wanted to call her Lassie.
Right, okay, fair enough.
And she grew up with me and I grew up with her. And I came home from the vet college after the first term of my first year in university as a vet student. And my dad, who was very old school and very unsentimental in many ways about animal loss, in my absence, you see, while I was away at college, I came out after getting off the bus, out into the yard, out through the barn, and I was calling the dog. And Dad just came out and casually said, I know, I had to get her put down.
Wow.
And it was like I was hit by a train.
Absolutely, of course it was.
It was an awful thing.
Yeah, the way it was handled was...
He hadn't considered it. He was talking the depths of 1980s.
And a farm animal.
And a farm
dog.
He didn't factor in the bond. The dog was 13 years old. She had gone off her hips. Really, really bad hip dysplasia. He had the farm vet in the yard. They euthanized the dog.
There and there.
Without a second thought.
Right.
But I've never forgotten that, the impact it had on me.
I could imagine. Those things don't happen.
So that would be 101, how not to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was your own dad.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, another question coming, couple of ones in. Des, can you ask Des, when is the best time to let a dog go? And can their body actually be donated to veterinary schools? Or how does that work? No, you can't donate their body to veterinary schools. Right.
No,
well,
unfortunately.
How do you kind of do
my best advice,
colleges?
If this person has two very good parts to her question. When the right time to let them go, I have a phrase I use in relation to that. It's better to let them go a day early than a day late.
Yes.
And what I mean by that is that I want to prioritise their quality of life and make sure that their last day of life is a good day. So then you'll have no regrets that you didn't leave it too late.
Yeah.
So you have to always work with your vet and go by whether the quality of life is still there or not. And do remember to let them go a day early rather than a day late. Now, as regards how to add meaning to that passing, the best advice I can give you on that would be to have your pet individually cremated. Yeah. And the ashes will come back. And the ritual of grief, in terms of having the remains, does add meaning to it and does add comfort. Yeah. Okay, fair point. Jim was on. He says that he went through with his 2-year-old dog, which was diagnosed with cancer at the age of 2 some time ago back. He had the dog since the age of 8 weeks, subsequently part of the family, even though for a short period of time it was horrendous because of the diagnosis. Yeah, the suddenness of it. Yes. So that's a different situation from the death of an older dog. Yes. So you're still going through it. You have trauma and shock in a situation like that. I have to say, as a vet, that's a common scenario for us too, because cancer is all too common. Yeah, and we're going to be covering that. We are, yes, and we are losing them between the ages of 2, 4, 5, 6, up to 10 with cancers. Yeah, and the problem with cancer is the trauma and the shock of that is that it's back to the original point that dogs and cats live shorter and more intense lives. Yes, when they get sick, they get very sick. and they get sick quickly,
Yes.
and they go downhill quickly.
Right.
And there's a shock of that, in that oftentimes by the time we go through the process of sending away tests for sampling
Yeah.
and getting results, oftentimes by the time we even get the results back, your dog is worse.
Yeah.
The condition is worsened.
Because it moves so quickly.
Cancer moves
Is
so
that just
quickly.
because it's a small body and it just moves at the end of the day?
They have a very fast metabolism, so cancers will grow very quickly.
Yeah.
And I know this, and I warn people about this.
Yeah. Yeah. That once the diagnosis comes, there is really not a lot you can do.
They won't have time
Yeah.
to get themselves used to the idea. It'll be weeks often in severe cases.
Okay, interesting. Interesting. As I said, we'll be discussing more about that tough topic a little bit later on in the next few weeks, maybe after far side of Christmas. We had 2 cats from kittens. They lived to be 19 years. Got them when they were a few weeks old. 3 dead now, 7 years, and we missed them terrible on this day, believe it or not. Have them in a picture frame and have lots of pictures of them. We bury them in the back garden. Is this still popular?
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Yes, so people have options in relation to the death of a pet. The county council might beg to differ.
Yeah.
In terms of whether it's technically permissible or not, but lots of people do bury their pets in their gardens.
Nobody's going to say too much about that, to be honest. No.
The second option we offer people is group cremation, where they'll go off to the crematorium in a group of other animals. And then the third option is we can have your pet individually cremated, and the ashes will come back in a nice urn or a casket. You can have it back in a little casket that you can bury with the pet's name on it. You can have them back in a scatter tube so that you can scatter the ashes in your pet's favourite place. But with the intensity of the modern human-animal bond, it's very important to mark the process of the loss of this pet in whatever way is more appropriate and suits your family.
Okay, there's another question coming in. It's to do with death, but it's not to do with, I suppose, knowing that it's coming around the corner. It's more to do with, I had to put my golden Labrador asleep 14 years ago, as all of a sudden he showed some serious jealousy towards my then months-old granddaughter.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, things got worse. We had to put him asleep after 14 years. Why would that be for a start?
Behavioural changes.
Yes.
There'll be literally jealousy or aggressions like that. That's a protective instinct misdirected towards the wrong person.
Yeah.
Misdirected towards a child. That's all too common as well.
Is it, yeah?
We probably euthanize 1 or 2 healthy animals a month for aggression.
Wow.
For misplaced, misdirected aggression.
Yeah.
Now, in those cases, there's a disappointment and an anger and a sense of self-blame for a lot of people. And we have to talk them through the process and analyse it. To what extent was it your fault or not?
Yeah.
And generally, to be fair, it's not.
Yeah.
Things just happen. Animals' temperaments can just change.
Yeah. 2 questions coming in on cremation. First of all, how popular is cremation based on what you were saying there a few moments ago back? And how much is cremation?
Yeah, it's every other pet.
This is official cremation. This is just isn't.
No official cremation.
Yeah,
The pet crematoria. There's one called Paw Prints.
Right.
In County Meath and Dunboyne.
Okay.
There's a couple of few of them in the country, and costs between 250 and 350 euros. Which is expensive enough, John, yeah?
It is, yeah.
300 euros-ish.
Yeah.
Yeah, depending on the size of the pet.
Yeah.
And for that then, your pet goes away to be individually cremated. They'll send you a certificate to state that your pet was individually cremated, and the ashes will come back then in a casket with a nice little brass nameplate on the ashes.
Okay.
And then you can do what you wish with them.
Yeah. Okay, a few nice comments coming in regarding our sensitivity covering the slot. Well, it's Des' sensitivity. I'm only asking the questions, but thanks to James, who said he's an IEC driver. Hi, lads, love listening to this slot when out and about. Well done to Des, great team, great vet. Very interesting subject and very well handled. Thank you. Yeah, when we think about animals, and I suppose no matter what time of the year you lose animals, I would just see another one coming in regarding how to help the bereavement of animals through children. Well, you mentioned your own childhood there, but for children, they have to handle it differently. Yeah,
I think it's very important to bring children in and let them say goodbye.
Yes.
And explain to them. And to do use Christian terminology if it's appropriate for your family, and talk about the dog going to heaven.
Yeah.
And talk about the fact that the vet has given medicine to Fido and Bonnie, and it hasn't worked and she's very sick. And we need to let her go to heaven now because the vets have done everything they can do and it's time to say goodbye.
Yeah, absolutely.
you need to simplify it to that extent, but be very clear.
Yeah.
Very, very clear, very direct. If you don't, you have years of trauma.
Yeah, I mean, look, when it comes to your animal, there's loads of different types of bereavement that you're going through.
There is.
One, there's a dog goes missing, and even though he's not physically dead, he's gone missing.
That's loss,
And
yes.
that's loss. That's
Yes.
a huge loss. That sometimes can be even worse. It's also what you're saying there. There's the trauma. There's putting a dog down for behavioural issues. There's serious illness bereavement, and there's old age bereavement. I mean, there's a whole host of different types of ways
There is
you will be bereaved.
accidental trauma as well.
Yeah.
A dog hit by a car.
Yes.
That's an awful shock on families, on children. And again, our job is to try and minimise that trauma by helping people deal with it and take the crisis down a little and, explain it and help people deal with it, even children, as best we can. You see, the human-animal bond is so much closer, tighter than it used to be.
Yeah.
Animals are like members of the family now. When something happens, though, we can't shirk away from it, and we can't have unrealistic expectations about the animal's life cycle and lifetime, and we can't have unrealistic expectations about what vets can do.
Yeah.
Because if we overly humanise them, we're only setting ourselves up for a fall. Setting ourselves up for tragedy.
Okay. On that note, we'll wrap up. One final comment came in. It says, just to let you know, Des looked after my dog for years, and when it came to letting him go, Des was very helpful. And one thing I remember from our conversation was that he told me, I wasn't doing the dog any favours by holding on for longer.
Yeah, I hope I wasn't too.
Yeah, Donal let him wrap hanging there.
Yeah,
Donal Healy,
tough.
thanks for that, Donal. Appreciate that.
It's you see, these are tough decisions that you have a responsibility to make the tough decision.
Yeah, okay.
It's very hard.
Brilliant. Okay, well done. It was a tough conversation, but thank you for all your kind comments regarding the way this was done. But we will be going into some tougher stuff far side of Christmas. And a few people actually, there was another one that came in about doggy dementia, Des, which may be worth having a look at as well.
It is. That's worth talking about, John, and we will. And I'm going to continue the conversation next week and talk about quality of life factors.
Yeah.
Look, at the weather's dark. It's the depths of winter. I think it's better to face these problems and talk about them, because we're experiencing these sort of things every day of the week at this time of year.
Okay, on that note, we'll wrap it up. We're back again next week, and this will go up in podcast later on this afternoon.
It's a pet's life with Jim Dog, Ireland's first pet resort by Des the Vet. Managed by vets, loved by pets. Daycare, vet care, premium pet food and grooming. Visit at petslife.ie.